Thank you for joining us. On our discussion today, I wanted to go over a post that was sent to me. Not sent to me, but it was posted on social media. All right, so it's a young man. He sent a video of an imam. I think he was in London, and he goes on to say this: many young men go into marriage not knowing that a woman is created very differently to a man, not knowing what and how to be with a woman because she's emotional. The woman is emotional, not knowing what to do when she is very sensitive towards her feelings. So as a result, it becomes a shock to the man. So men must learn the ways of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and know that men and women are different. And men are to educate their sons on how to be a husband, about what the rights are of a woman or his wife, and not to abuse them and not to oppress them. So thank you for joining us. This is Travis Sellers.
I'm John Wilson.
This is the True Rebels Attain Victory lunch break discussions. So that's where I started off, like right there. And my response,
Right.
I immediately said, "Oh man, well that's the most sexist thing you can say." And why are we listening to this? Like, as men are we listening to this?
So
I know you did. I thought it was sexist, but good.
right. So I would say I don't think that I understand why you would say that it's sexist, but I think that part of it is just because I think if I'm correct, just in the sense that just defining things for women and things,
Right.
Stuff like that,
Yeah.
which I think is important, to not do. But I also think that he is not taking into account that men have emotions too. And sometimes men also need to, they need to calibrate their feelings as well.
Yeah.
As he's talking about women, he needs to, if you're going to lecture
Right.
about what someone ought to do or
Okay.
what they ought not do,
Right.
I think it's kind of important. Not to make everything like this false equivalency, but I do think that it's important that if you start talking about what people ought to do or what they ought not do,
Right.
that you take into account that men have emotions too that need to be kind of placed in check sometimes.
And that's basically what I was saying. What would have been the correction would have been like men need to learn about their emotions.
Absolutely.
And because they're very
Absolutely.
sensitive. But I went on to, and there was some pushback. The young man gave me some pushback, but that's okay. But so, I wanted to say this segment is called the men's health. We're talking about men's health as it relates to a question that I can't remember her name, but it was a question that she said: is culture, or the culture of masculinity, stoicism, competition, and dominance hurting men in our society? So that's what we're addressing today. But spinning off of that, and which is based off of this, paternalistic perspective that women are too emotional. Oh, I'm mad at that on, but
Right.
and they're very sensitive, right?
Sure.
So here's some statistics, right? So based on the statistics of, if we're talking about being abusive, so I spun off of the abuse part and the oppressive part, right?
Right.
If we're checking abuse and oppressiveness, why mention a woman's emotional state or her emotional state, right?
Right.
Who
she can be.
Yeah, who should we be checking in their emotional state or their emotional intelligence, as you would say?
Yeah. Again.
Yeah, we should be checking them in. So based on this, so based on that, it says, I think I got, from several different sources, but one of them was from the CDC, of course, and one of it was Department of Justice. These are all statistics that I got from, these, well respected organizations or departments of United States that serve the public in domestic violence, violent crimes, when people take their own lives. So they have all the statistics. So I'm gonna run it down. So of all the violent crimes, domestic violence and abuse, 15%, the police found that men. So out of violence, out of all the violence, 15%. What I meant to say is all the violent acts. 15% are domestic abuse or violent acts. Right? That makes sense.
Okay.
And then another, when I say this other statistic, it may make more sense. So, but the police found records that said that men are significantly more likely to be repeat perpetrators and significantly more likely than women to be physically violent towards their partner, to have more threats and more harassment. Right? That's one. It said women were found to be, and then going into the mental health. Oh no, this is still about assaults. So women are found to be 5 times more likely to suffer sexual assault as an adult than men, and twice as likely to experience domestic abuse. Well, that's speaking towards who is the victim and who is having the emotional state where they're perpetrating violence against the other, as you would say, right? So that's me again addressing like, okay, why are we talking about women's emotional state and their emotionals? I mean their feelings.
I understand.
Yeah. So I just wanted to let people know. So and then it says that men commit more acts of violence than women, and the reports find that 75.6% of all offenders were men, and only 20.1% were women. So the reason why there's a lack is because I think they are taking into account that a violent act is also when you take your own life. That makes any sense. So that's probably why that's there. And it said also speaking to the mental state of men and women, it says suicide statistics, right, reflect that men die at the end of as a result of trying to end their life or their attempts to end their life than women. 4 times more likely than women. Even though women are more likely to make more attempts, men, they are successful, right? And then it says globally, men have less attempts, but they die from their acts 4 times more likely. So this is a global effect. Right. So this is not just but it's just speaking towards mental state. Women. It says because here overall research has found that women, with anxiety disorders are more likely to internalize their emotions, right? Which typically results in withdrawal, loneliness, and depression. You hear like women talk about that a lot. But men, on the other hand, are more likely to externalize their emotions, which leads to what? Aggressive, impulsive, coercive, and non-compliant behavior.
Yeah, I think that you know that. You know what I mean? I think that it shows.
But I'm saying the only reason my point to I wanted to point that out, and we can go and talk about other things about masculinity and stuff like that, is because of this, the new wave of toxic masculinity and all that, that new phrases and things like that. Right. They're appropriate. They're appropriate in a way, but I wanted to, because it was a younger guy that I knew, and I'm like, hold up, it does sound kind of sexist when you're saying that, okay, yeah, a person's getting up there, yeah, don't abuse people anymore because they're, women are the more likely to be very sensitive, so we can't abuse them. Okay, like you're doing them a favor because they're sensitive to their emotions, right? Instead of saying like, we have to do better with our emotional intellect, right? That's what I was trying to point out. Instead of being condescending to women, even though I know you was trying, he added the religion in there and he was trying to do the right thing, but you're still condescending to women, which again does what? It leads to more subjection of women being under the demise or under the abuse of men. Because it's like, oh yeah, you are emotional.
Right.
You are very sensitive, but you are beating on a woman, or you are more likely to hit a woman, or more be aggressive towards a woman. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's why I was like, all right, we got to roll that back a little bit. I just got to give you a different perspective of it.
No, I appreciate that. I think too that like you said, it's one of these things where it definitely kind of subjugates women, but it also is a situation where men are not having really good man to man discussions about men.
Yeah.
And that's a missed opportunity where even if you're going to talk about male and female relationships, is just to recognize that some of the feelings that men have, we suffer from, some of the same things emotionally, that is, but then it can even be, we can even be more sensitive. Like I know that one of the worst things you can tell a man or talk with a man about is saying that, you can be sensitive, because, the stigma of being sensitive is one that most men will look at and say, well, that doesn't really define me. I don't want to be sensitive, as if somehow that's something that's going to be life-threatening or bad for the individual, right?
Right.
Or you're inadequate as a man if you do display some sensitivity, right?
Right.
So we know that we go through that, right? We know that that's something that lots of men go through, but it also means that it's a discussion that needs to be had, right? It has to be one of those things where you say, listen, you have to recognize when you're feeling like that, okay? You're being emotional. You have to understand that when you lash out like that, you're being emotional.
Right.
And when
you're showing emotion.
Right, you're showing emotion. Yeah. And that when you decide that you have no other recourse to get somebody to understand where you're coming from, that you're going to be violent.
Exactly.
That's emotion. All right.
Yes.
That's and the fact that somebody can say something to you.
Extreme.
And you get this acute feeling in your gut that you've been offended. You're being sensitive.
True.
That you gotta recognize that and it's important to have that discussion because it's one of those situations where in our society where it becomes so acceptable for a man to lash out physically when they feel that way, it becomes normal. And we're dealing
just see our last discussion. Like we even talked about the violence in the city where
absolutely
we're sensitive. We I guess we accepted that. I don't know if it's everyone. I don't say it was everyone because it is a small population, but that part of that population has accepted that yes, we're very sensitive, and if something happens, I must react or respond with physical violence enough where I'm actually shooting another person.
Sure.
So I mean,
sure. No, and again, that's certainly part of it, right?
Right.
So certainly an important part of that is just recognizing, man, where the emotions of people, even in the community, even in our neighborhoods, some of the young men are reacting out of their emotions. They have these completely irrational acts and with each other that don't realize that it's raw emotion. And I that goes into such another subject.
Does.
You know what I mean?
It
Because
does.
you really kind of want to examine that. You really want to kind of peel the onion back a little bit more on, these emotions and what causes that.
Right.
But even though we don't have the opportunity or the time to do it now, the bottom line is we do have to get those kind of things in check.
Right. I mean,
and all men, and we just have to learn how to do it better.
Well, I mean, on lines of that, I mean, I don't want to go too hard with the violent part, but I mean, we're already talking about it.
Right.
But I think it's just fight or flight. It's natural human instincts, and I think that it's a plan. I mean, it's a plan, I believe, to keep. Well, I mean, also I wanted to add real fast. I mean, the black population does suffer disproportionately on the side of these negative effects of violence and domestic violence.
Absolutely.
Taking ending your own life and things like that. So I would say that it's a fight or flight, especially in the neighborhoods. Like people actually have fear. It's like a fear. You can see it. Like when you talk to the students and our members, they speak to the fear that they have.
Right.
And real fear, not
right.
It's not even fake.
Right. No. It's visceral fear.
I used to think it was like, come on, man, like this
no.
Just tell them that just tell them that you're not with that. Like, you're not trying to be on it.
Yeah, it's not quite like
No, it's
these
not.
days.
It's not. And no.
It's not that simplistic.
I don't want to get
right. Yeah,
I'm
right.
messed up.
Right.
But I mean, so this is a real fear that people are facing, and that fear is going to lead to the anxiety. It's going to lead to the frustration. It's going to lead to withdrawal and all the other things. How people manifest their fear is going to just come out.
Do you think that in many ways that black men may experience or may have some of this? Do we suffer from this more than say some other cultures, and does it and how it impacts our families and our neighborhoods along the lines of we were talking about? I think. Emotional intelligence, things like that.
Because that young lady,
right?
She went online on TikTok or whatever,
right?
Made those posts about black men,
right?
And I mean, she's a clinician, unfortunately. Okay. I mean, not to get into it, but she was talking about emotional vocabulary,
okay,
which is important. I mean,
agreed.
But I guess she was trying to extend that type of, I guess announcement to people who are basically her peers.
Okay.
I don't think she's talking about people who are like committing violent acts, and so to speak. I think she was talking about probably more of a larger population. I guess an educated population, because you're talking about using vocabulary at a level where you're talking about. I guess you're talking about a consultative level.
Was she like cursing in the video?
She was cursing out, and that was another thing. It was a little bit of hypocrisy in it as well, right. Because she used disparaging terms and comments to relate them. Even though she's a clinician, right. You would know as a clinician. So that she using disparage. I think
she's trying to dumb it down so that she can have a conversation.
TikTok.
She was being sensational.
Yeah.
That was her way of being sensational.
She's being sensational, and she didn't know she was going to get fired from it. But still, right. I mean, but it's so many things that we can dissect in that whole bit too.
Right.
But I think she was trying to speak to the emotional intelligence in terms of being in relationships.
Okay.
And so that's a little bit different than like dealing with like you said, the visceral fear that you're having of your life on the street. It's a little bit different. But just having like, the lack of, I guess, how like women, they feel like they're on a different level emotionally and being able to express their emotions, even in that presentation. She was saying that, she was getting off the air that she was higher in her ability to express her emotions, but in the presentation, it was the hypocrisy of it because it looked like you were just being disparaging.
Well, also it kind of it goes to your point earlier about the brother that you were talking about who was discussing women and saying about their emotions. So it buys into the fact that she even thinks that she's more emotional or has a better understanding of it.
I think she thinks she's has superior in right. being able to handle her emotions and express her emotions because her emotional intelligence is higher. So and I think she even mentioned that's why she mentioned the vocabulary.
Okay.
Because she said she did have, and it's probably one of her experiences because I don't know if it became like a short form of a study, but she actually, does therapy with young men, right? Okay. And she found that they have the lack of ability to express themselves using like, I guess a wheel of emotions. You remember we used on the wheel of emotions? We did the wheel of emotions with them. So it went from the basic and then the more complex emotion, the terms that you can use. So I guess because she has the knowledge base, right. She understands that.
Sure.
But she weaponized it against those people who she was treating. And I think that's what she missed, is that you're weaponizing.
That's a really good point.
The fact that they don't have the knowledge, even though you went to school for it,
right?
You didn't actually somebody didn't actually teach you that,
right? Because
obviously you wouldn't be acting that way on a video, right? But I mean, not to go there, but I had to do that. But it's like I understand. Like we don't know, and most people are not taught. That's why you shouldn't take the higher position when you do have the awareness and you have the knowledge base. You are to share it, not to weaponize it. As, oh yeah, you guys, because that's not every man. For one thing, that's the people who are seeking therapy because they have the acknowledgement that I probably need help.
Right.
So and then why turn it around on them and say they don't have the? I mean, they're there for help.
Yeah, if anything, you got to applaud that type of courage. I mean, because at least they saw that
I was
you out to
saying,
do that.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like you said, to weaponize it or to turn it around,
Yeah.
you know, it's like you said that's it's definitely a certain form of hypocrisy, and her using that data against the very people who were interested in kind of,
Right.
you know, talking with her about it or whatever.
It's tough. It's tough.
Oh, it definitely is. You know, hey man,
I know TikTok is it's supposed to be entertainment, so.
right? No, well, and no, and that's cool, and it should be that. But you know, the other side of it is you know, to your point is to use that information or to be a professional, and then you know, kind of come out against you know some of those guys because they don't have the ability to you know discuss certain things or talk. You know, the reality is, man, like you know, not to get into this, but you know, our journey in this nation, culturally and as a race, you know, it has been obviously is really tough, and it's one that continues to be, and so
sure.
you know we, you know, maybe you know in terms of defining masculinity for Black men. In this country, it continues to evolve, and you know we continue to mature and see things differently sometimes. You know what I mean? It's just difficult sometimes discussing the way that you feel. You got to remember, I mean, you know, there was an outlet throughout history in this country that allowed men of European descent to not mask their feelings. They could talk about whatever they wanted to. They could dissent whatever way they wanted to. They could show anger any way that they wanted to.
Look
Whereas, right. Well, that's my point. So then you look at Black men. You
totally
know, it's an issue if you get if you have an opinion about something, you're instantly angry.
Right.
And a lot of people, you know, that may view this, who are professionals at what they do, really good at what they do. Know that sometimes when they're in a boardroom and they begin to speak and they begin to say something, especially if they're a man, it's instantly viewed as he's angry.
Yeah, especially if you use your hands. You start using your hands,
and even
man. It's like,
you know,
becoming aggressive.
He's becoming aggressive. But even if he doesn't, even if he's just someone that gives you know an opinion, or he's enthusiastic about that opinion, or he's very pointed about it. You know, but it doesn't matter. Even if he, you know, so it's just one of those things, man, where we have that delicate dance as men, that kind of it spills over from the professional into sometimes the personal, our personal lives.
And I think also to speak to like the competition, being stoic, is that you know, if you're in sports, like I know it's a small population that is, you know, engaged in sports.
Right.
But for some reason, I think even if you're not in sports, people are influenced by the culture of it for some reason.
Of course.
And that's, yeah, you know,
because it has lots of it has lots of metaphors for life.
Right.
Sports in general does.
Yeah. So I think that when we're taught from like I played sports. I started playing sports when I was 8, right? And I was, you know, mesmerized by sports probably even before that, looking at football and you know what I'm saying, basketball players.
Absolutely.
So I'm mesmerized by it. But you know, it's all aggressive, and no one wants to hear about you. If I would have said back then, I mean, really, like, I mean, it's different now. If I was talking about, oh, I need a drink of water in the middle of practice, I would have been running laps.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Now they have water available.
Sure.
But back then, water wasn't even available. I just remember, if I would have got like, you know, like I remember hurting my hand. If I would have revealed that, like my hand is hurt,
right,
it would have been the next guy ready to take my position, and then I'm sitting on the sideline.
Right.
So it's like it's like we're almost taught to hide feelings, and pain.
Is that all? But is that
for competition?
Right.
But for the competition.
So think about it though. Is that always bad though?
I don't think it's bad.
Okay.
I mean, I think it. All right. So I won't say that. I think it can be bad in a sense where you're going into trying to relate to someone else, like trying to establish a relationship with a woman. It can get bad then.
And explain in what way?
Because you're carrying around, you're carrying over the emotional level of this stark competition where you're hitting people, you're aggressive. It's almost like a fight or flight situation.
Okay.
And you're taught not to fight.
Right.
Because if you're a fight, you're a punk.
Right.
Or other terms, right?
Sure.
So you had to fight. So you're taught to fight. So it's like any challenge, anything, any situation, like it could be like, oh yeah, when you get around, it could be basketball, whatever. It's like when you go to, I guess get a rebound, you must box out and it has to be aggressive. When you go up for a rebound, you got to jump up aggressively. When you dribble, you got to make sure he's not, everything is like an aggressive move.
Sure.
And you're like heightening with your aggressiveness. So it's
Right.
like every move is aggressive.
Right, but and that may be, and that's true in sports, but but the other part of that is it's true in life, right? So the
Right.
thing is, you do have to be tough. Like life is
True.
often not one of these situations where that it's very ideal. It isn't all the time, right? There's certain things that you have to overcome, and you have to have some fortitude.
Right.
You have to be strong at what you do.
Right.
There are times where you've got to learn how to finesse things, and then there are times where you got to learn how to be absolutely aggressive. There's you got to turn up sometimes, and even in your relationship, even as in a relationship, you don't have to be. I don't think that you go at it being aggressive, in a relationship. I mean, obviously
right.
being
See?
aggressive in a relationship
Yeah.
gives you pushback. Like it causes conflict often.
Yes.
Being aggressive like that, it should be the opposite. But you just have to be, I guess, emotionally intelligent enough to realize
Right.
where you have to put that aggression, and then where you have to say, hey, there's some give and take here.
Right.
But sports is always attractive to talk about in life because all of the metaphors that you can imagine in proceeding in your life, you get in sports. I don't care what it is. Like even if you say, hey, young fella, 3 strikes, you're out. You know what I mean? Baseball, right?
Right.
If you got to push the ball forward. If you're
Right.
talking about, basketball or football, you know what I mean? You're at you got to punch it in, man. This is where you get aggressive. You're at the front, you're at the, the 1 yard line. You got to just push it through, you know what I mean? To help people.
But I think in terms of carrying that over, it becomes negative because all of those qualities you just mentioned are more like physical.
Right. But
So when it comes to like verbalizing,
but you got to be able to, again, that's the kind of thing. Well, no, but that's the reason why
okay.
it's a metaphor, and you have to explain it like that. And that's how you help people to grow. Like, yeah, okay, you got all these physical gifts.
But you have the ability to do that. I don't think.
Well, true. I do. You're absolutely right. I know. I do. I agree. But I was, right. I know everybody else is not going to always say that.
Not to put my father on the spot, but I mean he didn't know how to articulate certain situations where it's verbal. It's
Right.
like he's teaching me like how to verbally
Right.
handle my emotions, right?
Right. So that.
But
So,
he can speak to it physically.
of course he could, but that's the evolution of our families and our generations.
Oh, yeah,
Is
yeah.
that generation after generation, we got to be able to
gotta
hand
get
that
better.
down.
Right.
And even if he
Yeah.
never taught you that, right? Like, so again, I didn't know that about my father. I didn't really know my dad that well. But what I did know of him was that if he did not agree with you or he dissented on something, he could be physically violent. That I did know about him, right? But I thought, so I know that the other side of that is to say, all right, that maybe that's how he did things and to be effective in his family, but I probably have to do things differently. And that's the responsibility on all of us. Like you can say that well, that's the way I was raised as my pop, but neither you or I, and we are a microcosm of lots of other men who said, okay, listen, man, seeing Pop did it, he did it that way.
Right.
Don't completely agree with that. I'm going to be a little different with mine. And so I'm going to do it this way. So I can explain that you've got to be aggressive in sports, but that does not necessarily translate to your relationships. And the way that it has to translate to your relationships are ones where if you're going to be enthusiastic, you're going to be powerful and be strong, you're being powerful and having to understand other people.
Right.
You're being enthusiastic or about trying to give and take, trying to understand the other individual as much. And I know that may sound corny and that may sound ideal, but at the end of the day, when you employ those types of tactics in your relationships with your woman, with your children, with your spouse or whomever, you see it's effective.
Right.
You got to be able to switch that up. I mean, because I love fighting. I love boxing.
Right. Yeah.
I love boxing. I love the art of combat.
Like I don't know why, but he loves it.
I absolutely because for me, there is of all the sports, boxing is the number one sport that is a metaphor for life. It is, because the one thing that we know about life is you're going to probably get knocked down a little bit. You have to show some fortitude. You got to be tough. You have to have endurance. You have to have strategy. As much as we look at it as a brutal sport, it is also a science, and it's the science of surviving in the midst of adversity. And that's what life is. Like, life, again, it's not always just very ideal. Like, sometimes, there are times where, you don't want to come to work. You don't want to talk to people. You feel like, you've had some experiences, and you got to get through that day. You got to be polite to people. You still have to, and you still have to display professionalism at a time when you don't want to be professional.
Right.
All of that is boxing. All of that is fighting.
See there, ladies and gentlemen, that is emotional intelligence, okay?
Thank you, brother.
I'm just saying, that's what it is. And so, I mean, that does speak to what the young lady was saying. And I think that what you're saying also speaks to the imams. Like, if you want to help people, like you said, grow emotionally and do better with their relationships, you speak to them.
Sure.
You don't have to be disparaging to
right, and that exists in you too. You have to recognize that all of what you're talking about right now
is in you.
That exists in you as well.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So you have to learn how to balance that.
Right, and I think the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be like, yeah, the message is for you. It's not for the next person or for the woman. It's for you. If I'm talking to you, it's for you. I'm talking straight to that person.
Okay.
I mean, I think I read a hadith where he even said, "This is for you," meaning that I'm speaking to you, even though it's recorded.
Sure.
I'm speaking to you.
Right.
So, and I think that we have to keep that in mind too. And sometimes I just think that when you have that platform, you just have to be a little bit more responsible than someone who's just getting up and speaking. And that's the only one I wanted to address.
I would agree with that, and I think we all do.
Yeah.
I think that anytime that people are under the auspices of our voice, whether or not it's our members, people who we work with, our family members, that the things that we say, we have to learn to be a lot more careful with that, and that's always tricky, man. Right. It's just one of the things. Like, listen, people make mistakes. People. True. You got to be able to say, listen, man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way.
Right.
But that's where, again, the emotional intelligence comes in, and where you're able to own it. And unfortunately, a lot of times.
You say, I'm saying what?
What?
He said, the emotional intelligence is, you say what? If you make a mistake?
That you own it.
And you say what?
I don't know.
You say, I'm sorry. You said, I'm sorry. Yeah. It's so simple to say, I'm sorry.
Just to say, I'm sorry.
Like, people have a hard time with that, man.
I know they do. And so, but that's, to my point, right? So to my point is that, I remember, man, like that is so important. I don't know what it is about people that they know that they're imperfect, but it's something about lots of people where they don't want to own the fact that they can make mistakes and that they need to atone for what they do. Right. Where they, or it's something as simple as saying, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, man.
You know what I mean? I didn't mean to do injury to you. Mm-hmm. I thought I was doing right when I was doing this. And that speaks to, not to go back to this, not to flip back, but that speaks to things with our dads, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas the reality is they were doing the best they could with the information they had at that time. They thought that being strong was, get up, I know you're busted up, I know you're injured, but if you don't get up, now I know you're sitting down and you scraped your knee up and you're messed up, but if you don't get your ass up in a couple of minutes, I'm gonna smack you in your mouth, even though you're already injured. You know what I'm saying? Even though you're already injured, right? So, but that's the best information they had for thinking that they could give us strength,
right? To motivate us to be better than where we are,
right? Because they didn't have that. Right. But the other part is that it is so vitally important to realize that. You got to be able to say, you got to be able to look at the other part that I think stops people from saying sorry is that people, we have this mechanism within us to not be able to look at each other, like to look at ourselves. Like even though we have a mirror, we'll look at the mirror to criticize or look at the great image that we have of ourselves. Yeah. And we'll look at that and we'll glorify that. But we won't look at ourselves internally and say, what could I do differently in that situation?
Yeah.
Why did I have to come off like that? What opportunity can I take and learn something from that? And then say, I'm sorry, because I don't want to do injury to you. Right. I love and respect you, or at least I respect you. Or I may not even know you that well. And I'm sorry I came off that way. That's not normally how I would do things.
Right.
But we don't. We let that moment pass, and now the person is looking at us like, all right, he's basically a dickhead, and now I got to deal with this guy.
Yeah.
Or I'm gonna take the conversation. I'm gonna make it worse now as a result of that.
So I have to be tougher.
I got to be tougher. I got to be right than him.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as we both know, after a period of time, shortly, if you've got these two conflicting things headed towards each other like that, these two immovable objects, they're gonna clash at some point. Sure. And that's what's going on in our communities. Not, that either again a lack of emotional intelligence or just a lack of self-awareness. It doesn't even have to be that I got to be somebody that understands emotional intelligence. That's too much. It's even too much for me. Yeah. It's just having awareness of who you are,
right?
And being comfortable within that. Being comfortable with being, hey, I'm a brilliant person. People think that I'm brilliant. I'm a brilliant individual. I do things right. I'm a nice person. I'm a thoughtful person. Say it, live it, be in your truth.
Well, I think that I was thinking about the common courtesies that we, as a part of mental health as well, I think, just being able to, like you said, like say sorry, being able to, to pull back from a spout of anger or frustration, being able to, that takes a lot of, self-awareness. And I don't think we're, some way, I don't think we're really taught that.
We weren't, but you know what though? Not doing that is a tragedy, and it's bad. And people need to learn how to do it. All right, I'm being that forthright. I was in personal, but I was in a relationship with someone, and years ago, and with a woman who could not say that she could not use the words "I'm sorry."
Oh,
now
I know it gets on my nerves too, but
yeah, but if you're in a relationship with someone and you spend any amount of time with someone, they're going to make mistakes. Okay, you're going to do things that someone may be odd. They may even do something that offends you or something that makes you angry. Most times in relationships, it kind of builds up. You know what I mean? Most people don't outright do things that are just disrespectful. But you have to recognize that if you're a human being, you're a person, that you have the ability to offend someone just like they have the ability to offend you.
That's true.
Like, you've got to know that. Like, you can't
That's
be
just basic stuff, right?
It should be 101, right? That's basic stuff, right? So if that's true, then you have to have a built-in mechanism that's able to say, you did injury to me. I would appreciate it if you not do that again. I don't even think you meant to do it, but I think you owe me an apology. You have to be able to say that to people, but in doing that, you have to also be able to tell other people, I'm sorry I did injury to you.
Right.
You got to be able to do that. If you're good at telling people that they hurt you, you got to be good
at saying sorry.
Exactly. And this individual couldn't.
Right.
And once I noticed that, at the instant that I noticed that it was something that would happen on a regular basis, it basically spelled the end. The clock started ticking. Right.
What point in the relationship did you say, was it like in the beginning, the middle, or did you wait to?
No, it was probably, I would say it was towards the beginning. It was towards the beginning. It wasn't, I know that's what I'm saying. I was patient to some degree. I was patient to some degree because I wasn't certain that that's what it was. And because I'm always trying to examine myself first.
It takes a while
to see if that's what it is.
Right,
Am I being sensitive?
Right.
So I got to look at myself as a man. You see what I'm saying? And, you know what I mean? On some real stuff, right? So I'm thinking the same thing. I'm thinking, okay, I'm mature enough to realize that I can be sensitive too. Maybe I'm being too sensitive about this. Maybe my emotions are kicking in. Maybe you need to be a little tougher. Maybe this, you gotta have thick skin, man. You're in a relationship, you gotta have thick skin. It may not necessarily be that.
Right,
but you know what I mean? So that is where it takes a little longer to discover this, right? So, but now that you're still doing it, you're still going through these self-examinations and not correcting that crap. It gets
you're in the midst of it.
Right, you're in the midst of it. So now it's at this point where you say, you know what, I see what this is, and you don't have the ability to do that. That is something for me is that's not cool. That I can't. And the fact, and if I bring it up to you, and we have a conversation about it, right? If now we're having a debate about it, that's worse.
Yeah.
Because
if you just bring it up and when you mean like if you say this is what hurt me,
right?
and then they start debating on you. Well,
Right.
I didn't even know.
Right.
It's like,
Or if they can't even acknowledge what you say, and that's what happened with me. That's where the point where I was like, okay,
Gotcha.
that's that's it for me. Even if you can't acknowledge that that's what you do, that's a problem. When you can't get to the point where I say, you never apologize.
Yeah.
I don't think you know that. Now, I know what that. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand in relationships, and again, this can be professional, it can be personal, it can be whatever.
Right.
Where people will say, I can't say the words, but I'll try to do something extra to
like,
make up for that.
For that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So I know that you have to play that delicate dance. See, and even that is something else that you're considering, right? If you're that type of person, and I try to be that way, right? So I get that could happen, but I also understand and need to have the words. Like, I need you to acknowledge that that's what this is,
Have
and
the
this
words,
is what you are
and
doing.
that's it.
Right. And have the words, and that you are doing it, because the words are empty without the action. So don't get me wrong. I need the action too, but I need the intention. I need you to say, listen, I apologize for that, or I'm sorry for that. I recognize that what I did caused injury to you.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. And for a person who has to struggle with that,
Yeah.
I find that that's difficult for me. I'll be honest with you, man. For me, that spells, for me, yeah, that's a problem. That spells me, yeah.
And I think that's where, our sensitivity level, being aware of your sensitivity level, that's where that crosses the line for me. And that's where it takes me to, like, anger and frustration. Like, if you can just don't cross that line.
Right. And I mean, it may be a reason why you cross the line, but and not that it matters, but I mean, but it does. It all matters depending upon, how things go. But again, man, if you're somebody who don't even have the self-awareness,
Right.
to look into yourself and say, here is where I should do that, it says a lot about you to me.
Right.
It does. Like, if you can't be the type of person that can examine themselves well enough to realize that I can, because first of all, nobody's perfect. Why do you think they got erasers on pencils?
Yeah.
I mean, shit happens. You know what I mean? Like people, nobody's
It's made
perfect.
with the pencil, right? Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? I'm sure at one point they didn't have it, and then they realized, I did the math problem wrong. You can stick this on there.
Yeah.
I got,
I can just be doing real fast.
Exactly. So, I mean, but people, you need that, Trav. You need to be in a situation where you can look in yourself first, I believe. I mean, or at least, and not even first, but at least have the ability to do that.
Right.
And say, hey, hey, am I tripping? Am I going too far with this way I'm going? Or look at the other person. You know how you could say something to somebody, and even if they're laughing, behind their smile is, I know he ain't just say that shit to me. Right? All of us have done that. Right? All of us, even though you're smiling, because your brain still works really well and you're processing. I know he ain't say that. Whoa, you trying to be funny? But you're smiling because you're saying, okay, I'm trying to calm myself down. I don't want to react. I don't want to spaz just yet. Or mentally have a meltdown and do something crazy. So I'm gonna, chill. Right? All of us have that. So you have to be able to, people, I believe, have to have the ability to look at themselves, and that is one of the toughest things that most individuals have. Oftentimes, when we look at ourselves, we're very insulated by an idea of what we think we are, and looking in the mirror may give us, or in the mirrors of our minds, spiritually, or our hearts, may give us an image that is very ugly and objectionable. So we don't want to face that. So instead of dealing with that, we ignore it, we turn it off, and we go with the illusion of what we think we should be. And in doing that, again, it ignores what should be done in terms of how we have normal discourse with each other.
Right.
You know what I mean? And won't say sorry. Or, won't
and the thing
recognize
always, all those things are spot on. I agree with all those things. Not always, but I've learned to come to try to rid myself of what I would call a debating type of style in my relationships, and begin to try to listen a little bit more. It's hard for me. It's a challenge for me.
Right. I understand.
But I think that with the criticism of, some of the women saying that men are not emotional intelligent. I would say that's, it's tough to listen to that because it's almost the same end as that imam saying that women are too sensitive and emotional. So I just remember
Right.
it's just like we got to come
Right.
together instead of being separate and at each other. And if it's almost like if a teacher is like a person who brings out of something, brings the out of the student what's already in. So you're like refining what's already there and making it better, right?
Right.
So if you're the person who has the knowledge, you're trying to bring out of something. You're not going to try to criticize it and try to make it feel bad, because that's not growth and development, right?
Right.
So I always say, like, if you know better, make it easy for me to be better. If you know better, I mean, you can. I mean, if I'm being angry or something like that and violent, that's something totally different. But what can we do to get that not to be that way? That could be the conversation. You know what I'm saying? If you know more, right?
Right. You know better, you do better. And
Yeah.
you know more, you want to provide that information to me so I can be better.
Right. I mean, I think it's I think it's enough. I think it's enough what you said is being awareness, and I think we can end there by saying that self-awareness is key. Remember, knowledge of self, not knowledge
key.
of the other person.
Right. Knowledge of self.
It's
No.
not,
And-
to me, in relationships, it's not a war. So it's not like you're trying to gather information to, I mean, some people do, I guess. It's tough. I'm not going to get into a relationship, but
Right.
I just wanted to say, like, men's mental health, there's things out there. I probably will post something in the video to show where men can get help. And just for now, National Domestic Violence Hotline, you can call 1-800-799-7233. So that's one resource that you can use if that's happening. But yeah, try to be more self-aware. I guess that's the lesson.
And brothers, reach out. Brothers, reach out. You know what I mean? If you need help, if you feel like you're at the end of your rope, research things that you think can help you. I get it. A lot of people like to say, yeah, well, if I smoke a J, I'm cool. You know what I mean? If I take a couple drinks, I'm cool. If I hit a little blow, I chill out. Yeah, the bottom line is all of those things obviously mask a bigger thing. I mean, if you're just having a good time, that's one thing. But if you think that taking those substances are going to somehow magically make those things go away, they won't. Reach out, man. If you're at the end of your rope, don't take it out on your family. Don't take it out on your wife. Don't take it out on your children or people at your job. There's help out there, and we need to seek that help.
Exactly. Well, I would say reading unlocks the mysteries of life. Reading unlocks the mysteries of life. Read more, probably better for you. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
True Rebels Attain Victory.
Peace and love.
See us on, or follow us on, subscribe to our YouTube
Please.
channel. We already have other videos there. And one of our things is, what do you think about this N-word? We're still on it, but
Right. We're definitely
yeah. Peace and love. Have a good one.